Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to my channel where today I will say a few words about the Elektron Digitone and specifically in how I think it is a brilliant synthesizer for ambient improvisations. If you watched my channel, you may have noticed that I've made lots of tracks with the Digitone and they're basically all ambient improvisations, and most of them also using just a single track and not using the arpeggiator or the sequencer, just changing synth parameters and playing the filter and doing that over time, creating different textures. And this is one thing that I think the Digitone really excels at. So when I was planning to buy the Digitone or thinking of buying the Digitone, I thought that I really liked the sound of it. I'd heard sound examples in videos on YouTube, and I thought, well, every sound that I hear from this synthesizer is appealing to me, which isn't always the case for a normal subtractive synthesizer. This is an FM synthesizer, which makes it quite different in how it creates sound. But lots of people, they might associate FM synthesis with harsh, glassy, digital sounding sounds, but that's not what you get from the Digitone. One of the things that FM synths usually do is that they restrict the parameters in a way that means that almost no matter what you do, and of course the Digitone might be the extreme example of this, almost no matter what you do with the actual synth parameters, it will create pleasing sounds because it matches the wavelengths of the different sound sources to make sure that the harshness is kept out and you get all that quite nice, ethereal, soft smoothness that FM is also capable of, and you get it in spades on the Digitone, and I think more so than on most other FM synths as well, and certainly more than you get on an analog synth that you can patch up for FM, where the harsh sounds are probably what you will encounter first. So when I got this, I wasn't expecting to use it the way I did. I thought that I would be using the sequencer a little bit and do some experimental music making. Maybe you do some melodic stuff. But then I just really fell in love with the way you can play the synthesizer and change the parameters while you're playing. So I'm going to go into now a few other things that makes it a really good ambient synthesizer for me. It might not be applicable to you, but I think this might actually be one of the very best ambient machines available. First things first, the interface. I know some people are a little bit put off by the idea of a synthesizer that isn't knob per function. And while I understand that criticism, the problem with most synthesizers that aren't knob per function is that they don't have an efficient user interface. And sometimes even knob per function ones aren't efficient either. If you have to go to different knobs relating to the same function, sometimes you actually end up being less efficient than if you have a clever system like you do on the Digitone, where each of these main buttons here have three functions, so three different subpages on each of these. Each of those have up to 8 parameters, and it's very quick and easy to navigate between them because you press a button once, you get the first page, you press a button again, you get the second page, you hold function, you press the button, you get the third page. Everything is really close to the surface, and people talk about menu diving, but that is something you usually get with so-called knob per function synthesizers if you want to do anything that isn't done with the knobs per function. Then you have a menu system that you sometimes have to go deep in. You have to go and set LFO destinations, and then you go LFO 1, and then you have to choose from a long list of things. and you have to dive into that, and it makes it actually harder to do complex routing on a knob per function synthesizer a lot of the time than it is on the Elektron, where everything is, of course, pre-wired, you might say, in a very useful way already, and it's a very well thought out user interface. And it's very intuitive as well. So when you push these buttons, you get a visual, very clear visual feedback of what's going on. Because another thing about knob per function is that the visual feedback you get is usually restricted to looking at where the knobs and switches are on the panel. On the Digitone, there's a lot of information on the panel all the time, and it relates to what you are working on at the moment, what function you are currently selecting, and it's a nice big screen as well. And because the unit itself is so small, this retains the center of focus, as opposed to being maybe your filter button over here somewhere, or filter knob. So I think that is quite good. One thing that immediately I must say I'm not a big fan of on the Digitone, although it doesn't really bother me so much, and I'll get back to that, is the system for storing sounds, saving sounds, all those things feels a little bit fiddly to me, or a little bit heavy, a little bit hard to sort of get to grips with, and it's a little bit, yeah. I don't usually play that way though, so my way of creating music usually involves improvising. So the sounds, everything you hear is made as I play it, and all the adjustments, all the changes to the sound are created on the fly. I'm not that keen on saving a preset. I just want to create a sort of a sonic image of the change of sonic texture, I suppose. So that's what my music most of the time is. And of course, when I got the Digitone, I wasn't expecting that to be so good for it, but it ended up being one of those that I've used so much because it is perfect for that kind of sonic exploration. It feels like you're going on a kind of a journey of discovery when you start playing, and you just see what happens. And there are a few features in particular on the Digitone that makes it perfect for this kind of playing. So I'm just going to go into that. Let's see what sound I've got here now. A nice ambient sound already, actually. Let's see, I've got a bit of delay on there. The feedback is off. Okay. Now, a few other things that make this the way you would approach a sort of a slow evolving ambient track, the way that I do it is there are some parameters that you will spend more time working on than others. Now, one thing that is very important to get an evolving sound on an FM synth is to make sure that your synth envelopes are different. So one thing I usually do as a little, not quite a trick, but almost as a matter of course, you see these two envelopes here, the A and B envelope. I've got actually a delay on one of them, so the starting point is different, and you can set the delays here on the second page. You can set the delay for when the envelope kicks in, and so the sound, even from pushing the key just once and without moving any other sliders or buttons or knobs, you get an evolving sound already. So that's one little ambient trick. Another thing that I think is really good is to play the filter. And the Digitone has something I haven't actually seen on any other synthesizer, and that is the second page here, and that is the bass width filter. So this is a way to adjust. So it's not just a normal, this is a normal filter page where you have an ADSR envelope for the filter, and you have your normal setting, your resonance and your frequency, and now it's a low pass filter. And then you can set different styles of filters: high pass, 4-pole low pass, for 2-pole low pass, and off. I usually keep it in the 4-pole low pass mode, but the big magical thing about this filter is that you can change which part of the sound you want to hear. So if I do like this, you hear the full sound. But this allows you to set the entry point and exit point, as it were, of the spectrum where you want the sound to be. So if I do like this, I'm narrowing down the frequency range, really. And this allows me to pick out just parts of the spectrum. Which also means I can make very quiet sounds because I'm just using a tiny little part of the spectrum now. And then I can slide it in very slowly. I can make it go away again. And that is a really powerful performance tool if you play the Digitone the way that I do. And you can shape and move the sound. You can adjust the spectrum. It's like a very powerful but very simple equalizer in a way. And it's almost like it's an additional filter on top of the other filter. So I do believe that the bass width filter comes in first in the signal chain, and then the normal filter comes after. So what it's doing is it's creating a taper on the low frequencies and high frequencies around the center point, and then that is the sound that is then sent into the filter. Another fun thing that I do to create a little bit of additional interest is to actually change the filter type as I'm playing. Create this little sort of hitches and hiccups and glitches in the sound, just to add a little bit of interest. Another thing that's very useful, and this is particularly if you want to play with more than one track while doing ambient. Now, there is one very big advantage to playing with just one track when doing ambient, and that is because you want really long notes. So you've got a long release here on the VCA envelope, but you can also put it to infinite, and that will just keep going. And you can let it keep going while you adjust other things, like the drive and the filter again. Or the bass width. Now, of course, if you're playing with more than one track now, you can set one of the tracks and start a sound, sort of a drone or a background sound, something like this, and you just leave that going, and then you go to the second track. Let's see what we got here. And you still got that sound going in the background with its own parameters. And then when you want the sound to taper off, you can change the VCA envelope and set it to down again, go back to infinite. So that's one way you can sort of evolve things and also keep a sound going underneath. Now, one thing about using several tracks, because the notes are so long, you could encounter voice stealing, because the Elektron Digitone has 8 voices, so once things start overlaying each other, you do get a sort of a last note priority voice stealing thing happening, and you get these little clicks that you can encounter in the music, and also your earliest sound might disappear. Unless there's some settings, I think, for what you prioritize as well, but I'm not looked into that. So one thing to be aware of, especially if you're using 3 tracks, is that you might start getting voice stealing. If you use 2 tracks, you usually should be good to go. Another thing that I think is a really powerful part of the Digitone as a performance instrument is the Lfo Control. There's a lot of interesting things that can be done with the LFOs. So very often I would use the LFOs for an ambient track on quite a low speed, and usually, and of course the depth, that depends a little bit on what I'm trying to do now. So at the moment I've got synth detune. Just increasing the speed now. You can hear the changing happening a little bit faster, but if I keep this really at a slow speed and a slow depth, and of course then the effect is more subtle. Synth ratio, still a very low speed, low depth. So there's a lot of things you can do with the LFOs, and you can also have LFO2 changed parameters of LFO1, which is quite brilliant as well. And this is one of those things that it might not be actually the best interface, because I think there are too many destinations for my taste. I would have liked to be able to put up a list of favorites so I could just have the destinations that I wanted. But technically, you can also do that over MIDI. So if I really wanted to get into controlling this perfectly now, one thing I would do and could do is to set up a MIDI patch on my Zoya that where I had a selection of the LFO destinations that I wanted, and I would be able to select just between those instead of having to scroll through the menu now, because as you're playing, you also get, it'll be a little bit easier to see if I do a little bit more effect there from it. Because as you scroll through it, you get a preview of the effect as well. So if I was able to select that directly, that would be easier. But it's such a powerful tool to creating that sonic interest, which also is something that I think is nice to have in an ambient track. It shouldn't just be smooth and soft and very slowly evolving all the time. I like having a little bit of something coming in, creating a kind of narrative, something that's going on. And often when I give titles to my tracks after I've made them, sometimes I sort of get into what kind of story do I feel that this track is telling me, and very often it is about some kind of space journey. Very often it is it's a little bit of sense of danger sometimes as well, based on some of the sounds that can be a little bit darker and grittier and a little bit more sinister. So I think that these features, particularly the LFO, the filter, and particularly the bass width filter, and of course the synth envelopes, which of course are really basic part of FM synthesis, I think these really make it such a powerful tool for ambient. And additionally, of course, the fact that all sounds that come out of the Digitone are pleasing, or at least interesting, is more correct, I think. It's not the aim of art to be pleasing, as I sometimes say. So let's do a little bit of. of course, in addition, it also has a built-in delay, which is quite useful for creating interesting effects as well. Just let the delay stand up a bit. And the feedback on the delay actually goes up above 100%, so one has to be a little bit careful. It can feedback. There's also a sort of base width filter for the delay. And the effects is, of course, as common to both. So right now the delay echoes are getting louder and louder, because feedback is past 12 o'clock. It's overdriving a bit there as well. So it's quite a lot of exciting stuff you can do, and it's everything, all the controls you need are so easily accessible. It's so intuitive, and the visual feedback is so great that it's very easy to play it as an ambient machine. I haven't even looked at I'm not going to say too much about the actual synth engine now, because I'm sure lots of other videos cover exactly how it works. But I just wanted to say a few words about the kinds of things that I really like using, the features that I think make this an absolutely amazing both sound making synthesizer and also an ambient synthesizer. So I think that's basically what I wanted to show you in this one. I hope you found that interesting or enjoyable or whatever else. And I'll see you in my next video. So thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.